The autumn wind of 1887 whistled through the gaps in the weathered cabin walls, as 73-year-old Samuel "Sam" McKinnon sat hunched over his oak writing desk, his gnarled fingers gripping a fountain pen with the determination of a man who had something important to say before his time ran out. The flickering light of a kerosene lamp cast dancing shadows across the paper, as he carefully formed each word, knowing this would be the last letter he would ever write. Subscribe to our channel for more incredible tales from the Old West that will touch your heart and remind you that it's never too late for miracles. Sam had built his ranch in the Colorado Territory 35 years earlier, when he was a young man with dreams as vast as the prairie stretching endlessly before him. He had carved out a life from the unforgiving wilderness, raised cattle, survived Indian raids, harsh winters, and the loneliness that came with choosing solitude over society. But now, as he faced his final days, he was writing to the one person who mattered more than all of his accumulated wealth and land, his estranged son, Thomas. The letter began with words that had taken Sam decades to find the courage to write. "My dear son, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and it is too late for me to say the things I should have said when I had the chance." Sam paused, his hand trembling slightly as memories flooded back. Thomas had left the ranch 23 years ago, at the age of 19, after a bitter argument that had torn their family apart. Sam's wife, Margaret, had died of consumption 2 years earlier, and the grief had made both father and son raw and angry. Thomas had wanted to sell the ranch and move east to pursue his education, while Sam had insisted that the land was their legacy and that Thomas had a duty to continue what his father had built. "You are weak and ungrateful," Sam had shouted during their final confrontation. "I've given you everything, and you want to throw it all away for some foolish dream of becoming a teacher. You've given me nothing but dirt and loneliness," Thomas had fired back. "I won't waste my life the way you've wasted yours talking to cattle because you're too stubborn to maintain relationships with people." Thomas had left the next morning, taking only his clothes and his mother's Bible. He had written twice in the first year, but Sam, still angry and proud, had burned the letters without reading them. Eventually, the letters stopped coming, and Sam had convinced himself that he was better off alone. But now, facing his own mortality, Sam understood that pride was a cold companion in one's final hours. "I was wrong about so many things," he continued writing. "I was wrong to demand that you live my life instead of your own. I was wrong to let my grief over your mother's death poison what should have been our shared healing. Most of all, I was wrong to let my stubborn pride keep me from reaching out to you all these years outside the cabin." Sam could hear his cattle lowing in the distance. He had built the McKinnon Ranch into one of the most successful operations in the territory, with over 3,000 head of cattle and 20,000 acres of prime grazing land. But what good was an empire if there was no one to inherit it? No one to carry on the family name. Sam's health had been failing for months. The doctor in the nearby town of Cedar Falls had told him that his heart was wearing out, and that he had perhaps weeks, maybe months, if he was careful. But Sam had never been careful about anything except building his ranch, and he wasn't about to start now. "The ranch is worth more money than you could spend in 3 lifetimes, Sam wrote, dipping his pen in the inkwell. "But I would trade it all for the chance to see you again, to meet your wife if you have one, to hold a grandchild if I've been blessed with one. I know I have no right to expect your forgiveness, but I'm asking for it anyway." The letter went on for several pages, with Sam pouring out decades of regret, love, and longing. He wrote about the time Thomas had broken his arm falling from a horse and how proud Sam had been when the boy got right back on. He wrote about Margaret's last words, which had been about Thomas and her hope that father and son would reconcile. He wrote about the countless evenings he had spent on the porch, wondering where Thomas was and whether he was happy. "I have left instructions with my lawyer in Denver," Sam continued. "Everything I own will go to you when I die. The ranch, the cattle, the money in the bank, all of it. I hope you will come back and see what we built together, even if you choose not to stay. There's a letter from your mother hidden in the family Bible, something she wrote for you before she died. I was too angry to give it to you then, but it's waiting for you now." As Sam neared the end of his letter, he found himself struggling with the most important words of all. How do you apologize for 23 years of silence? How do you express a lifetime of love in a few sentences, Thomas? If there is any part of you that can forgive an old fool who let pride destroy the most important thing in his life, please know that not a day has passed that I haven't thought of you. You are my son, and I love you more than all the land and cattle in Colorado. I pray that wherever you are, you have found happiness and peace. Sam signed the letter with his full name, Samuel McKinnon, and then added a postscript, your mother's grave is on the hill behind the house, next to the oak tree she loved. There's a place beside her waiting for me, and room for your family when the time comes. You will always have a home here. Don't miss what happens next in this emotional journey of redemption and family. Subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to see how one knock on the door changes everything. Sam folded the letter carefully and placed it in an envelope, addressing it to Thomas McKinnon, general delivery, anywhere in these United States. He had hired a private detective 3 months earlier to try to locate his son, but the man had found no trace of anyone by that name. Thomas could be anywhere, or he could be dead. Sam might be writing to a ghost. He sealed the envelope with wax and his signet ring, then placed it prominently on the desk where his foreman, Carlos Mendez, would find it after his death. Carlos had been with the ranch for 15 years and was the closest thing Sam had to a friend. He had promised to make sure the letter reached Thomas somehow, even if it meant hiring every detective west of the Mississippi. As Sam finished with the letter, he felt a strange sense of peace settling over him. For the first time in 23 years, he had said everything he needed to say to his son. Whether Thomas would ever read the words was in God's hands now. The old rancher stood slowly from his desk, his joints aching from the arthritis that had been plaguing him for years. He walked to the stone fireplace and stirred the dying embers, adding another log to keep the cabin warm through what he suspected might be his last night. Sam had always been a practical man, and he had made all the necessary arrangements for his death. His will was filed with the lawyer in Denver, his affairs were in order, and Carlos knew how to run the ranch until Thomas could be found. If Thomas never came, the ranch would eventually be sold and the money donated to the church in Cedar Falls where Margaret was buried. As he prepared for bed, Sam allowed himself to imagine what might have been. Thomas would be 42 now, probably with children of his own. Had he become the teacher he had dreamed of being? Had he found love and happiness in whatever life he had built for himself? Sam hoped so, even if it meant Thomas had never looked back or regretted leaving the ranch. The wind continued to howl outside, rattling the windows and causing the lamp flame to flicker. Sam had lived through hundreds of such nights on the frontier, but this one felt different. There was a finality to it, a sense that the story of Samuel McKinnon was coming to an end. He lay down on his narrow bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling beams he had hewn with his own hands 35 years earlier. Every board in the cabin held memories. Every stone in the fireplace had been placed with hope for the future. But what was a legacy without someone to inherit it? As Sam drifted toward sleep, he whispered a prayer he had been saying every night for 23 years. Lord, if my boy is out there somewhere, watch over him. Keep him safe and happy, and if it's possible, let him know that his old father loves him and is sorry for being such a stubborn fool. The lamp burned lower, casting longer shadows across the room. The letter to Thomas sat on the desk like a sentinel, waiting for morning light and the beginning of its journey into an uncertain world. Outside, the cattle were settling down for the night, and the vast Colorado sky was beginning to show the first stars. Sam McKinnon closed his eyes, not knowing that his life was about to take a turn that would prove it's never too late for redemption, never too late for love, and never too late for the knock on the door that changes everything. The old rancher had written what he believed was his final letter, but sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of another, and sometimes, when we least expect it, the universe has other plans. Dawn was breaking over the Colorado plains when Sam McKinnon awoke to the sound that had haunted his dreams for 23 years, someone knocking on his door. For a moment, he thought he was still dreaming, but the persistent rhythm of knuckles against what convinced him otherwise. He sat up slowly, his old bones protesting against the sudden movement, and listened carefully to make sure he wasn't imagining things. If this story of hope and second chances is touching your heart, make sure you're subscribed to our channel for more incredible tales from the frontier. 3 firm knocks, a pause, then 3 more. It was the same pattern Thomas had used as a boy when he came home from school, a little signal between father and son that had become their private tradition. But that was impossible. Thomas was gone, had been gone for over 2 decades, and Sam had no reason to believe he was anywhere near Colorado. Sam struggled to his feet and shuffled toward the door, his heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with his failing health. The letter he had written the night before still sat on his desk, its white envelope gleaming in the early morning light streaming through the windows. "Who's there?" Sam called out, his voice hoarse from sleep and emotion. "Pa," came the reply, and Sam's knees nearly buckled. The voice was deeper than he remembered, weathered by years and experience, but unmistakably familiar. "Pa, it's Thomas, it's me." For a moment, Sam couldn't move. After 23 years of wondering, hoping, and praying, his son was standing on the other side of the door. The impossibility of it seemed too good to be true, but the voice was real, and the knocking pattern had been too specific to be a coincidence. With trembling hands, Sam unlatched the door and pulled it open. Standing on his porch was a man of 42, tall and lean like his father had been at that age, with graying brown hair and blue eyes that Sam recognized immediately. The boy had become a man, but the eyes were the same ones that had looked at him with hurt and anger 23 years ago. "Thomas," Sam whispered, the name coming out like a prayer. "My God, it's really you." Thomas stood awkwardly on the porch, a worn leather satchel in his hand and uncertainty written across his weathered face. He wore the simple clothes of a working man, a clean but patched shirt, sturdy pants, and boots that had seen many miles. There was something different about him, something that suggested education and refinement despite his modest appearance. "Hello, Pa," Thomas said, his voice carrying a mixture of emotions that Sam couldn't quite read. I got word that you were sick. I came as soon as I could." Sam's mind raced. How had Thomas found out about his health? Sam had told no one except Dr. Harrison in Cedar Falls, and he couldn't imagine how that information would have reached his estranged son. But in that moment, it didn't matter. What mattered was that Thomas was here, standing before him like an answer to 23 years of prayers. "Come in," Sam said, stepping aside and gesturing toward the interior of the cabin. "Please come." And Thomas entered slowly, his eyes taking in the familiar surroundings that had once been his home. The cabin looked much the same as it had when he left, though smaller somehow, and filled with the silence of a man who had lived alone for too long. "You look," Thomas began, then stopped, clearly struggling with what to say to a father he hadn't seen in over 2 decades. "Old," Sam finished with a rueful smile. "I look old and used up. I know, time hasn't been kind to either of us, I suspect." Thomas nodded, and Sam could see the boy he remembered lurking behind the man's eyes. There was still hurt there, still anger, but also something else, a willingness to be here, to have made the journey back to a place that held so many complicated memories. "I heard you were dying," Thomas said bluntly, settling into one of the wooden chairs by the fireplace. "Dr. Harrison sent word through a mutual friend. He said you didn't have long." Sam lowered himself into his own chair, the one he had occupied through countless lonely evenings. "The doctor is probably right. My heart is giving out, and I'm not getting any younger. But seeing you here, I feel stronger than I have in months." They sat in silence for a moment, 2 men separated by years of pride and misunderstanding, trying to find their way back to each other. The letter on Sam's desk seemed to glow in the morning light. Its purpose suddenly changed from a final message to a confession that could be delivered in person. "Tell me about your life," Sam said finally. "What became of you after you left here? Did you become the teacher you wanted to be?" Thomas's face softened slightly at the question. "I did. I went east to Pennsylvania, worked my way through college, and spent 15 years teaching in a small town near Philadelphia. I married a wonderful woman named Elizabeth, and we had 2 children. The word had caught Sam's attention, and he saw pain flicker across his son's face. Elizabeth died 3 years ago, Thomas continued, his voice barely above a whisper. Influenza. And our daughter, Mary, died when she was only 8. Diphtheria. I only have my son left, Samuel. Named him after you, though I never told him why. The revelation hit Sam like a physical blow. He had a grandson named after him, but he had also missed the deaths of a daughter-in-law and granddaughter he had never known existed. The cost of his stubborn pride was more devastating than he had ever imagined. I'm so sorry, Sam aid, reaching across the space between their chairs to briefly touch his son's hand. I should have been there for you. I should have been part of your family. I wanted to write to you when Mary died, Thomas admitted. I started a dozen letters but never sent them. I was still angry, and I didn't know if you would even care. I would have cared, Sam said firmly. I would have moved heaven and earth to be there for you. I've thought about you every single day for 23 years. Thomas looked surprised at the vehemence in his father's voice. Really? I thought you were probably glad to be rid of me. We said some terrible things to each other the day I left. Sam stood and walked to his desk, picking up the letter he had written the night before. I was writing this when you knocked, he said, holding out the envelope. Everything I wanted to say to you, everything I've regretted for 23 years. I was going to have Carlos mail it after I died. The emotional reunion is just beginning. Subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell to see how this family begins to heal decades of hurt. Thomas took the letter and held it for a moment without opening it. What does it say? It says I'm sorry, Sam replied. It says I love you and I was wrong about everything. It says this ranch means nothing without family to share it with. Thomas carefully opened the envelope and began to read. Sam watched his son's face as he absorbed the words that had poured out the night before. Words of regret and love and hope. Tears began to form in Thomas's eyes, the first emotion he had shown since arriving. You really kept Mother's last letter all these years? Thomas asked, looking up from the pages. I did. I was too angry to give it to you when you left, but I could never bring myself to destroy it. It's in her Bible, waiting for you. Thomas finished reading the letter and carefully folded it again. I came here thinking I would stay just long enough to see you before you died. I thought maybe we could make peace, but I wasn't sure I could forgive you for all the years of silence. And now, Sam asked, hope creeping into his voice. Now I realize we were both stubborn fools. Thomas said with a slight smile. I could have written. I could have come back sooner. I let my pride keep me away just as much as yours kept you from reaching out. Sam felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that he had carried for over 2 decades. Does this mean you can forgive an old man who spent too many years being wrong about what was important? Only if you can forgive a son who was too proud to admit he missed his father, Thomas replied. The reconciliation was interrupted by another knock on the door. This one lighter and more tentative. Thomas and Sam looked at each other in confusion. Are you expecting someone? Thomas asked. No one except Carlos, and he doesn't knock. Thomas went to the door and opened it to reveal a boy of about 15, tall and lean with the same blue eyes that ran in the McKinnon family. He had clearly been traveling, with dust on his clothes and weariness in his young face. Father, the boy said, looking uncertainly at Thomas. I followed you like you told me not to. I was worried about you traveling alone. Thomas sighed and stepped aside to let the boy enter. Sam, I'd like you to meet your grandfather. Samuel McKinnon. Pa, this is my son, your grandson, Samuel Thomas McKinnon. The boy stepped into the cabin and looked around with curiosity, his eyes finally settling on the old man by the fireplace. 3 generations of McKinnon men stood in the same room for the first time, each seeing something of themselves in the others. You came all the way from Pennsylvania by yourself? Sam asked the boy, impressed by his determination. I couldn't let Pa face this alone, young Samuel replied. Family should stick together, especially during difficult times. The wisdom in the boy's words wasn't lost on either of the older men. Here was a 15-year-old who understood something about family loyalty that had taken his father and grandfather decades to learn. You're right, Sam said, looking at his grandson with pride and wonder. Family should stick together. I'm just sorry it took me so long to remember that." As the morning sun climbed higher over the Colorado plains, 3 generations of McKinnon men sat together in the cabin that Sam had built with his own hands. The letter that was supposed to be Sam's final message had become the first step in rebuilding a family that had been broken by pride and misunderstanding. The old rancher had thought he was writing his last words, but instead he had written the beginning of a new chapter. Sometimes the knock on the door that changes everything comes just when we need it most, bringing with it the possibility of redemption, forgiveness, and the chance to build something beautiful from the pieces of what was broken. 3 months after Thomas and young Samuel's unexpected arrival, the McKinnon ranch was alive with activity that it hadn't seen in over 2 decades. The old cabin had been expanded with a new wing to accommodate the growing family, and the sound of laughter once again echoed across the Colorado plains. Sam McKinnon, whose health had improved dramatically since his son's return, sat on the expanded porch watching his grandson work with the horses, marveling at how the boy had taken to ranch life like he was born to it. Join us for the incredible conclusion of this heartwarming tale that proves it's never too late for family, forgiveness, and new beginnings. Subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories from the Old West. "He's a natural," Thomas said, settling into the chair beside his father. At 42, Thomas had found peace with his decision to bring his son west and help his father with the ranch. The teaching position he had held in Pennsylvania seemed like a lifetime ago, though he still spent evenings educating young Samuel in mathematics, literature, and history. "He reminds me of you at that age," Sam replied, his eyes bright with pride and contentment. "Fearless and determined, but with a good heart. You raised him well, son." The reconciliation between father and son had been easier than either had expected. Once they had both acknowledged their mistakes and shared their regrets, the love that had always existed beneath the hurt and pride had risen to the surface. They had spent countless hours talking about the lost years, sharing stories of their separate lives, and building new memories together. Thomas had told his father about his years as a teacher, about his marriage to Elizabeth, and about the joy and heartbreak of raising children. Sam had shared stories about building the ranch, about the lonely years after Thomas left, and about the community he had helped establish in the growing town of Cedar Falls. "I never thought I'd say this," Thomas admitted, "but I'm glad to be back. This land has a way of getting into your blood, doesn't it?" Sam chuckled. "Your mother used to say that the ranch wasn't just where we lived, it was part of who we were. I tried to force you to understand that when you were young, but some things can't be forced. They have to be discovered." The transformation in Sam's health had been remarkable. Dr. Harrison, who had been preparing the family for the worst, was amazed by the old man's improvement. "It's not just the medicine," the doctor had confided to Thomas. "It's having something to live for again. The human spirit is a powerful thing." Young Samuel had adapted to ranch life with enthusiasm that reminded both older men of the joy that comes from doing work that matters. The boy had learned to ride, to rope cattle, and to read the weather patterns that could mean the difference between success and failure on the frontier. "Grandfather," young Samuel called out from the corral, "come see what Thunder learned today." Sam stood with more energy than he had felt in years and walked over to watch his grandson demonstrate how he had trained one of the young horses to respond to voice commands. The bond between grandfather and grandson had formed instantly, built on shared interests and mutual respect. "That's remarkable, Samuel," Sam said, genuinely impressed. "You have a gift with animals." "I want to learn everything about ranching," the boy said earnestly. "Father says this will all be mine someday, and I want to be worthy of it." Sam and Thomas exchanged meaningful looks. The ranch that had once been a source of division between father and son had become the foundation for healing and hope. As autumn turned to winter, the 3 generations of McKinnon men established new traditions that honored both the past and the future. They read together in the evenings, with Thomas sharing his love of literature and Sam telling stories of the early days on the frontier. Young Samuel absorbed it all with the eagerness of a boy discovering his heritage. On Christmas morning, Sam presented his grandson with a special gift, a leather-bound journal that had belonged to Thomas when he was a boy. Every rancher needs to keep records, Sam explained, but more than that, every family needs someone to remember its stories. I want you to write down what you learn, what you see, and what you feel. Someday, your children will want to know about their heritage. Young Samuel accepted the journal with solemnity, understanding that he was being entrusted with something important. I'll write about you and Father, and about great-grandmother Margaret, and about how our family found each other again. That's exactly what you should write about, Sam said, his voice thick with emotion. The winter passed peacefully, with the three men working together to maintain the ranch and plan for the spring. Thomas had proven to have a good head for business, suggesting improvements and modernizations that would increase the ranch's profitability. Young Samuel threw himself into learning every aspect of ranch management, from animal husbandry to financial planning. As spring arrived, Sam made an announcement that surprised both Thomas and young Samuel. I've been thinking about what happens when I'm gone, Sam said one morning over breakfast. I know the ranch will go to you, Thomas, and eventually to Samuel. But I want to make sure it's more than just a piece of property. I want it to be a place that brings families together, not drives them apart. He outlined his plan to establish a trust that would ensure the ranch remained in the family for generations to come, with provisions for education, family reunification, and charitable works in the community. I also want to do something for other families who might be separated like we were, Sam continued. I'm setting aside money to help people find lost family members, to bring families back together. The McKinnon Family Trust, as it came to be known, would eventually help reunite dozens of families across the American West. But its first and most important success was the healing of the McKinnon family itself. This incredible story shows that love can overcome any obstacle and that it's never too late. For a new beginning, subscribe to our channel and share this story with someone who needs to hear about the power of forgiveness and family. As summer approached, Sam's health began to decline again, but this time he faced it with peace rather than fear. He had accomplished what he most wanted to do. He had reconciled with his son and met his grandson. The ranch would continue, the family name would endure, and the love that had been interrupted by pride and misunderstanding had been restored. On a warm evening in July, exactly 1 year after Thomas had knocked on his door, Sam sat on the porch with his son and grandson, watching the sunset paint the Colorado sky in brilliant shades of gold and red. I have something to tell you both, Sam said quietly. Dr. Harrison says my heart is failing again, and this time there's nothing he can do. I probably have weeks, maybe a month. Young Samuel started to protest, but Sam held up his hand. Don't be sad for me. This year with you two has been the best year of my life. I've seen my son become the man I always knew he could be, and I've watched my grandson grow into someone who will carry our family forward with honor and love. Thomas reached over and took his father's hand. I'm not ready to lose you again. You're not losing me, Sam replied. I'll always be here in this land, in this ranch, in the lessons you teach Samuel, and in the love that holds this family together. What we've built this year can't be destroyed by death. Sam lived for another 6 weeks, long enough to see young Samuel's 16th birthday and to watch the autumn cattle roundup. He died peacefully in his sleep on a crisp September morning, surrounded by his family and secure in the knowledge that his legacy would endure. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people from across the territory, testament to the respect Sam had earned during his years as a rancher and community leader. But the most meaningful tribute came from his grandson, who read from the journal Sam had given him. My grandfather taught me that land means nothing without family to share it with, and that love is stronger than pride. He showed me that it's never too late to say you're sorry, never too late to forgive, and never too late for the knock on the door that changes everything. Thomas and young Samuel continued to run the ranch together, honoring Sam's memory by building on the foundation he had established. The McKinnon Ranch prospered under their management, becoming known throughout the territory for its quality cattle and its commitment to family values. Years later, when young Samuel had grown up and married, bringing his own children to the ranch, he would tell them the story of their great-grandfather who had almost died alone, but was saved by love and forgiveness. He would show them the letter that Sam had written on what he thought was his last night, the letter that had become the first step in rebuilding their family. The old rancher's final letter had become the first chapter of a new story, one that would be told for generations in the McKinnon family. It was a story about the power of love to overcome pride, the importance of family, and the truth that sometimes the most important endings are really just beginnings in disguise. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of redemption, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Sam McKinnon's story reminds us that love never dies, pride is never worth losing family, and miracles can happen when we least expect them. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, and share this tale with others who need to hear that it's never too late for a second chance. Let us know in the comments what moment of this story moved you most. The knock on the door that had interrupted Sam's final letter had brought him the greatest gift of his life, the chance to rebuild his family and create a legacy based on love rather than land. In the end, the old rancher learned that the most valuable thing he could leave behind wasn't his ranch or his cattle, but the example of a man who chose love over pride and forgiveness over bitterness. And in the McKinnon family Bible, next to the letter from Margaret that Thomas finally read, young Samuel had carefully placed his grandfather's final letter, the one that was never sent, but had served its purpose by opening a door to redemption and reunion. It remained there as a reminder that sometimes the most important words are the ones we're brave enough to speak while we still have time. And sometimes the greatest miracles come in the form of an unexpected knock on the door.